minute. You stay here.
It Came from Outer Space didn't play by Hollywood's rules. It dragged Ray Bradbury into the desert, strapped cameras to actors' eyes, and built aliens that terrified test audiences so badly they demanded reshoots. This wasn't just sci-fi. It was a gamble wrapped in celluloid and shot through a stereoscopic lens that most theaters couldn't even project. These are 20 weird facts about It Came from Outer Space. And the bonus? The studio almost fired the director for refusing to show the monsters. Strap in, this gets strange fast. Number 1. Before the script existed, before the cameras rolled, before anyone said yes, there was just Ray Bradbury sitting in a room with producers who didn't trust him. The studio wanted a monster movie, something cheap, something scary, something that would pack drive-ins and disappear by Sunday. But Bradbury had a different idea. He pitched them a story about misunderstood aliens, beings who crash land on Earth not to conquer, but to repair their ship and leave. No invasion, no destruction, just fear, paranoia, and humanity's inability to accept what it doesn't understand. The producers stared at him like he'd lost his mind. They wanted tentacles and screaming. Bradbury gave them philosophy, and somehow, against every instinct in the room, they said yes. But there was a catch. They told him to write it fast, write it weird, and make sure people would pay to see it. Bradbury handed in a treatment called The Meteor. It was poetic, it was haunting, and it was nothing like anything Universal had greenlit before. The studio changed the title immediately. Too soft, they said. Not enough punch. So they renamed it It Came from Outer Space, slapped it on the poster, and hoped Bradbury's vision wouldn't tank at the box office. Spoiler, it didn't.
World with terror to bring you unforgettable suspense. What?
Number 2. Jack Arnold wasn't supposed to direct this film. He was young, untested, and had only one low-budget feature under his belt. The studio wanted someone with experience, someone who understood science fiction, someone who could handle 3D photography, which at the time was still experimental and frustrating for even seasoned directors. But Arnold had something else: obsession. He'd been studying the 3D format for months, sketching shots, planning camera rigs, dreaming about depth in ways most filmmakers ignored. When he got the call, he didn't ask for time to prepare. He said yes immediately and showed up to the first production meeting with a notebook full of diagrams. The producers were skeptical. They gave him a test: shoot a single scene in 3D, prove you can do it. Arnold walked into the desert with a skeleton crew and filmed a sequence so visually striking, so layered with dimension and dread, that the studio stopped questioning him. He got the job not because of his resume, but because he saw the format as a tool, not a gimmick. And once he had control, he used every trick he could imagine to turn a B-movie into something that looked like it cost 5 times the budget. Number 3. The desert location wasn't chosen for its beauty. It was chosen because it was cheap, empty, and hostile enough to double as an alien landscape without needing sets. The crew packed into California's Mojave Desert for weeks, baking under temperatures that regularly hit 110 degrees. There was no shade, no air conditioning, no relief. Actors wore heavy costumes, crew members hauled equipment across sand that burned through their boots. And the 3D cameras, massive and temperamental, overheated constantly. Every few hours, filming had to stop, so the cameras could cool down or risk melting the film stock inside. Richard Carlson, the lead actor, later said he spent more time waiting for equipment than actually acting. But the heat wasn't the only problem. The desert played tricks. Dust storms rolled in without warning, ruining takes and covering lenses. Snakes wandered onto set. One crew member was bitten and had to be rushed to a hospital an hour away. And at night, when temperatures dropped to freezing, the cast and crew huddled around fires, exhausted, sunburned, and wondering if this strange little movie was worth the suffering. But Jack Arnold loved it. He said the harshness made the film feel real, made the fear feel earned. Because in that desert, no one had to act scared. They already were. Number 4. The aliens in It Came from Outer Space were designed to be invisible. Not because of budget constraints, but because Jack Arnold believed the scariest monster is the one you never fully see. He wanted glimpses, shadows, suggestions, a single glowing eye, a distorted reflection, the outline of something massive moving just out of frame. but the studio hated the idea. They wanted creatures, costumes, something audiences could point at and scream. So Arnold compromised. He agreed to show the aliens, but only briefly, and only in ways that felt disorienting and nightmarish. The design team built something bizarre, a floating mass with a single cyclopean eye, translucent webbing, and tendrils that moved independently. When test audiences saw it, they recoiled, not in excitement, but in genuine unease. Some people walked out. The studio panicked and demanded reshoots to make the alien friendlier. Arnold refused. He told them fear was the point, and if people were uncomfortable, it meant the design worked. The studio backed down, but only barely. And decades later, that alien, barely seen and deeply unsettling, became one of the most iconic creatures in 1950s sci-fi. Not because it was monstrous, but because it felt wrong in a way audiences couldn't explain.
What was it? Where did it come from?
Number 5. Barbara Rush didn't audition for the role of Ellen Fields. She didn't even know the film existed. She was under contract with Universal, churning through B-movies and westerns, waiting for something that felt important. Then one day, the studio called her into a meeting and told her she'd been cast. No screen test, no callbacks, just show up and play the girlfriend. Rush was frustrated. She wanted roles with depth, characters with agency. But Ellen Fields, as written, was mostly there to scream and look worried. So Rush made a choice. She rewrote her character in her head. She played Ellen not as a damsel, but as a woman who refuses to panic, who questions what she sees, who fights to stay rational even when everyone around her is losing their minds. Jack Arnold noticed immediately. He gave her more space, let her improvise small moments, trusted her instincts. And slowly, Ellen became one of the smartest characters in the film. Not because the script said so, but because Barbara Rush refused to play her any other way. Years later, Rush said, "It Came from Outer Space was one of the few films from that era where she felt like a person, not a prop. And it was entirely because she made it happen herself." Number 6. The 3D format was a nightmare. The cameras were enormous, required perfect synchronization between two lenses, and broke down constantly. Every shot took twice as long to set up as a normal film. Lighting had to be adjusted for depth, actors had to hit marks with surgical precision, and if anything went even slightly wrong, the entire take was ruined. Jack Arnold later admitted he spent more time fixing technical problems than directing performances. But he also loved the challenge. He used the format in ways no one else had tried. He didn't just throw things at the camera for cheap scares. He layered the frame, foreground, midground, background, all in sharp focus, creating compositions that felt like windows into another world. In one scene, an alien's eye floats in the distance while characters argue in the foreground, creating a sense of unease that wouldn't work in 2D. But here's the problem. Most theaters in 1953 couldn't project 3D properly. Lenses were misaligned, glasses were scratched, audiences complained of headaches. And within a year, the 3D craze collapsed entirely. So, for decades, It Came from Outer Space was only seen in flat 2D prints, losing half of what made it visually groundbreaking. It wasn't until modern restorations that people finally saw the film the way Jack Arnold intended. And suddenly, it made sense why he fought so hard for a format everyone said was doomed. Number 7. Ray Bradbury hated what they did to his story. He'd written a thoughtful, melancholic tale about fear and empathy. But during production, rewrites happened without his knowledge. Dialogue was simplified. Subtext was spelled out. The aliens, which Bradbury had envisioned as tragic and desperate, were pushed closer to monsters. He visited the set once, watched a few scenes being filmed, and walked away quietly furious. He never said anything publicly at the time, but years later in interviews, he admitted the film broke his heart a little. Not because it was bad, but because it could have been so much more. And yet, despite his frustrations, Bradbury also acknowledged that Jack Arnold brought something to the film he hadn't imagined. A visual poetry, a sense of dread that elevated the material beyond the script. Bradbury respected Arnold as an artist, even when he hated the compromises the studio forced on both of them. In the end, Bradbury made peace with it. He said the film wasn't his vision, but it was someone's vision. And in 1950s Hollywood, that was rare enough to be worth something. Still, he never worked with Universal again. Once was enough. Number 8. The film's most iconic shot, the floating alien eye drifting through the desert night, almost didn't happen. Jack Arnold wanted it desperately. He sketched it, storyboarded it, pitched it to the producers as the visual centerpiece of the entire film. But the special effects team said it was impossible. They didn't have the budget, didn't have the technology, didn't have time. Arnold refused to let it go. So he did it himself. He worked with the effects crew after hours, experimenting with translucent materials, backlighting, miniatures, and forced perspective. They tested dozens of versions, most of which looked ridiculous. But slowly, through trial and error, they built something that worked. A glowing orb suspended on invisible wires, filmed in layers, composited with desert footage. When Arnold finally showed the producers, they were stunned. It looked alien in a way nothing else in 1950s cinema did. Strange, beautiful, unsettling. The studio approved it immediately and used it in every piece of promotional material. That single image, an eye floating in the darkness, became the face of the film. And it existed only because Jack Arnold was too stubborn to take no for an answer. Number 9. Richard Carlson wasn't the studio's first choice for the lead. They wanted someone bigger, someone with marquee value who could carry a sci-fi film and bring in audiences. But every name they approached said no. Science fiction was still considered bottom tier in Hollywood, a genre for kids and drive-ins, not serious actors. Carlson, on the other hand, said yes immediately. He loved the script, loved the concept, and saw potential in a role that wasn't just muscle and heroics. His character, John Putnam, was an astronomer, a thinker, someone who approached the unknown with curiosity instead of violence. That appealed to Carlson. But once filming began, he realized the role was harder than it looked. Most of his scenes required him to react to things that weren't there, aliens that would be added later, effects that didn't exist yet, empty desert with nothing but a camera and Jack Arnold yelling directions from 50 feet away. Carlson had to imagine terror, wonder, and confusion while staring at sand, and somehow he made it work. His performance carries a sincerity that keeps the film grounded even when the story gets weird. Years later, Carlson said, "It Came from Outer Space was one of his proudest roles, not because it made him famous, but because it proved he could sell the impossible." Number 10. The film's score was composed by a team of musicians who'd never worked on a science fiction film before. Universal brought in Irving Gertz, Henry Mancini, and Herman Stein, told them to create something unsettling, and gave them almost no direction. So they experimented. They used thereminds, oscillators, and unconventional instruments to create sounds that felt alien and wrong. Echoing tones, dissonant strings, electronic pulses that sounded like nothing audiences had heard before. Jack Arnold loved it immediately, but the studio was nervous. They thought the music was too strange, too avant-garde for mainstream audiences. They wanted something traditional, something safe. Arnold fought back. He screened sequences with the experimental score and with traditional orchestration. The difference was night and day. The strange music made the film feel dangerous. The traditional music made it feel like every other B-movie. The studio reluctantly agreed to keep the experimental approach, and the score became one of the film's most influential elements. Composers for decades afterwards cited it as inspiration for how science fiction should sound. Alien, unnerving, beautiful in its wrongness. And it almost didn't exist because someone in a boardroom thought audiences wouldn't understand it. Number 11. The film's opening sequence, where a meteor crashes into the desert, was shot using practical effects that nearly killed the stunt coordinator. Jack Arnold wanted the impact to feel visceral, real, explosive. So, the effects team rigged charges in a remote section of the Mojave, built a crater using dynamite, and filmed the detonation from multiple angles. The plan was simple: set the charges, clear the area, detonate from a safe distance. But on the day of shooting, the fuse burned faster than expected. The explosion went off while crew members were still positioning cameras. Debris flew everywhere. One camera was destroyed. A grip dove behind a boulder and came up with burns on his arms. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt, but production shut down for 2 days while the studio investigated. Jack Arnold was nearly fired, but when the footage came back from the lab, executives saw what he'd captured. A blast so powerful, so chaotic, it looked like something truly extraterrestrial had struck Earth. They kept the shot, kept Arnold, and added a mandatory safety officer to every future effects sequence. The crash that opens the film, the moment that sets everything in motion, exists because someone almost died for it. 021 to 024.
Yes, it came from outer space.
Number 12. The townspeople in the film weren't professional actors. They were locals from the small desert communities near the shooting location. Jack Arnold wanted authenticity, faces that looked weathered, suspicious, real. So instead of hiring extras from Los Angeles, he drove into nearby towns and started asking questions. He found ranchers, shopkeepers, mechanics, people who had never been on a film set. He offered them $50 a day and free meals. Most said yes out of curiosity, but once filming started, Arnold realized he'd made a brilliant choice. These weren't people performing fear and paranoia. They carried it naturally. Their skepticism felt earned. Their distrust looked lived in. In scenes where the town turns against Richard Carlson's character, you can see real suspicion in their eyes. Not because they were acting, but because they genuinely didn't trust this Hollywood crew that had invaded their desert. One local, a gas station owner named Frank Benson, delivered a line so perfectly that Arnold gave him 3 more scenes on the spot. Benson never acted again, but for 1 week in 1953, he was part of cinema history. And his face, craggy and severe, became the embodiment of small-town fear that the film needed.
Amazing answer only when you see the most thrilling picture in years.
Number 13. There's a scene midway through the film where Ellen Fields is possessed by an alien intelligence. Barbara Rush had to play 2 versions of the same character. The real Ellen, warm and human, and the alien Ellen, cold and calculating. The script offered almost no guidance on how to make that shift believable. So, Rush did something radical for 1950s Hollywood. She studied her own face in a mirror for hours, watching how her expressions changed, how her eyes moved, how subtle shifts in posture could communicate otherness. Then she showed up to set and asked Jack Arnold for one request: film the possessed scenes without any rehearsal. She wanted her first take to be raw, instinctive, strange. Arnold agreed, though he was nervous. The camera rolled. Rush straightened her spine, let her face go slack, and spoke her lines in a voice that was hers but wasn't. Flat, mechanical, terrifying. The crew went silent. When Arnold called cut, no one moved for a few seconds. Rush had created something genuinely unsettling, a performance that suggested something horrible wearing a human face. And she did it in one take, trusting instinct over technique. Decades later, directors would study that scene to understand how possession should be portrayed, and it all came from an actress who refused to play it safe. Number 14. The film's tagline, "It comes from outer space," wasn't created by marketing. It was lifted directly from terrified test audience comment cards. After an early screening, Universal collected feedback forms, asking people to describe the movie in one sentence. Dozens of cards came back with variations of the same phrase. It came from outer space and it scared me. Something came from outer space. I don't know what came from outer space, but I didn't like it. The marketing team saw a pattern and seized it. They stripped away everything except those 5 words, slapped them on posters in massive letters, and built the entire campaign around audience fear rather than studio promises. It was revolutionary for its time. Most films were sold with hype and hyperbole. This one was sold with dread, and it worked. The tagline became iconic, copied by countless sci-fi films for decades. But its power came from something real, not a boardroom pitch, but genuine terror scribbled on cards by people who just watched something that unsettled them. The best marketing, it turned out, was just listening to the audience's nightmares and repeating them back. Number 15. Jack Arnold shot the alien point of view sequences using a technique that had never been tried before. He mounted cameras directly to actors' heads, forcing them to walk through scenes while carrying 20 pounds of equipment on their skulls. The goal was to create a disorienting, wobbling perspective that would make audiences feel like they were seeing through alien eyes. But the execution was brutal. Actors stumbled over rocks, crashed into props, developed neck strain that lasted weeks. Richard Carlson later joked that he spent more time as a camera tripod than as an actor. The footage that came back was shaky, nausea-inducing, and absolutely perfect. When audiences saw the film in 3D, those POV shots made them physically uncomfortable. The theater would seem to tilt. People reported dizziness, a few even claimed motion sickness. The studio considered it a flaw. Arnold considered it proof the technique worked, because that discomfort, that wrongness, was exactly what he wanted. You weren't supposed to feel safe in those moments. You were supposed to feel like something not human was looking through your eyes. And for a few terrifying seconds, audiences did. Number 16. The cave sequences were filmed in real caverns outside of Riverside, California. Not sets, not sound stages. Actual underground tunnels that required the cast and crew to descend 50 feet below the surface with all their equipment. The 3D cameras barely fit through some passages. Lighting rigs had to be lowered on ropes. And the temperature underground was a constant 55 degrees, which sounds pleasant until you're standing still for hours waiting for a take to be set up. Actors shivered in their thin costumes. Crew members developed hypothermia symptoms. One cameraman passed out from a combination of cold and carbon dioxide buildup from all the electrical equipment running in a confined space. They evacuated, brought in ventilation fans, and kept shooting. Jack Arnold said those cave scenes were the most difficult of his career, not because of the performances, but because nature itself was fighting them. Bats would fly through shots. Water dripped onto lenses. Rocks fell from the ceiling mid-take, but the footage was worth it. Those caves felt ancient, alien, impossible. No set designer could have built something that real. The danger was real too, and somehow that danger made it onto film. Number 17. Universal didn't believe the film would succeed internationally. Science fiction barely worked in American markets, and they assumed foreign audiences would reject it entirely. So, they gave it a limited release, mostly in drive-ins and second-run theaters. But something unexpected happened. In France, the film became a phenomenon. Critics championed it as an example of American cinema with genuine artistic vision. They praised Jack Arnold's visual composition, Ray Bradbury's philosophical themes, and the film's refusal to provide easy answers. French theaters started holding midnight screenings that sold out weeks in advance. Students wrote papers analyzing the symbolism. Directors like François Truffaut cited it as an influence. Universal was baffled. They'd written it off as disposable genre material, and suddenly it was being treated like art. The studio scrambled to secure wider European distribution, riding a wave of intellectual respect they'd never anticipated. Meanwhile, back in America, it played to half-empty drive-ins and disappeared from most theaters within 6 weeks. The country that made the film barely noticed it. The country that received it as art wouldn't stop talking about it. Sometimes greatness requires distance to be seen clearly. Number 18. There's a moment late in the film where the alien spacecraft takes off, rising into the night sky in a shower of light and sound. That sequence required 12 different miniature models, each one hand-built and destroyed in a single take. The effects team couldn't afford to build duplicates. They had one chance to get each shot right. If anything went wrong, that angle was lost forever. They worked for 2 weeks constructing the ship models, wiring them with tiny lights, rigging them to pyrotechnic charges. On the day of filming, Jack Arnold insisted on shooting everything in sequence, starting with the smallest explosion and building to the largest. The first 3 takes went perfectly. The 4th model malfunctioned and exploded prematurely, destroying the shot. They had to improvise, rearranging the sequence to work around the missing angle. The final take, the ship's full ascent, was captured in one perfect moment of fire and light. When it was over, the effects crew cheered, not because they'd succeeded, but because they'd survived. Every explosion, every spark, every glowing panel you see in that sequence was captured practically, destroyed forever, the moment the camera stopped rolling. That's not special effects. That's controlled demolition with art direction. Number 19. The film never shows humans and aliens working together to repair the ship. In Ray Bradbury's original treatment, there was supposed to be a scene where the astronomer helps the aliens, a moment of cooperation that demonstrated humans could overcome fear. But it was cut entirely. Not for budget reasons or time constraints. Jack Arnold removed it deliberately. He believed the film was stronger if the aliens remained unknowable, if humans never truly understood them, if the ending was less about friendship and more about acceptance of mystery. The studio fought him on it. They wanted resolution, wanted warmth, wanted a handshake between species. Arnold refused. He said the point wasn't that aliens and humans could be friends. The point was that sometimes fear isn't justified, and sometimes the best thing we can do is simply step aside and let the unknown pass without trying to conquer it. That philosophy, radical for 1953, made the film feel mature in ways most science fiction didn't. There's no triumphant partnership, just a quiet understanding that not everything needs to be explained, controlled, or destroyed. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is watch something strange leave us in peace. Number 20. When It Came from Outer Space premiered, the studio held a massive 3D showcase in Los Angeles, complete with searchlights, red carpets, and celebrities who had nothing to do with the film. Universal wanted spectacle. They wanted glamour. They wanted people to forget this was a low-budget desert experiment and remember only the lights and the stars. Ray Bradbury attended reluctantly. He didn't want to be there, didn't want to smile for cameras or answer questions about a film that had drifted so far from what he'd imagined. So, he sat in the back row, alone, watching his story unfold on screen. Watching an audience react to something that was his, but also wasn't. They laughed at moments he'd written as tragic. They jumped at scares he'd intended as wonder. During the closing credits, while everyone else stood and applauded, he slipped out before anyone could ask him questions. He walked 3 blocks to a nearby diner, ordered coffee, and sat alone at the counter. A waitress recognized him from the premiere crowd and asked if he'd worked on that space movie everyone was talking about. Bradbury nodded. She asked if it was scary. He said he didn't know anymore. Years later, Bradbury admitted that night broke something in him regarding Hollywood. He loved cinema, loved the potential of film, but he couldn't reconcile what he wrote with what audiences saw. They cheered at the explosions. They screamed at the aliens. They missed the sadness underneath. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they understood something he hadn't intended, something deeper than his original vision. Either way, Bradbury kept writing, kept dreaming, but he never looked at It Came from Outer Space the same way again. It was his first lesson in letting go, and it hurt more than he ever admitted. Bonus fact: the film's most enduring mystery has nothing to do with aliens. It's about the voice. In several scenes, there's a low, echoing narration that seems to come from nowhere, warning about things to come. It wasn't in the script, it wasn't credited. And for decades, no one knew who recorded it. Cast members were asked in interviews and shrugged. Jack Arnold claimed he didn't remember adding it. Studio records listed it as atmospheric voice, uncredited. The mystery deepened when audio restoration specialists analyzed the recordings and determined the voice was heavily processed, layered with effects that shouldn't have existed in 1953. Some fans theorized it was Ray Bradbury himself, sneaking into the sound booth to reclaim his vision through whispered warnings. Others thought it was a studio executive, adding drama without permission. The truth was finally discovered in 2003 when a sound engineer's diary was found in a storage unit. The voice belonged to a janitor named William Thorne, who worked overnight at Universal. Jack Arnold had heard him talking to himself while mopping the soundstage, and thought his voice had an otherworldly quality. He pulled Thorne into a booth at 2 a.m., had him read a few lines, and buried them in the mix. Thorne was paid $20 and told not to mention it. He never did. 50 years later, his voice still echoes through one of science fiction's strangest films, proof that sometimes the most haunting performances come from the most unexpected places.